There you go. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Wednesday. My name is Jorge Acosta Palmera, and I'm the director of the Statewide Training Initiative. Thank you for joining us here today for the first installment of our Wellness Wednesday series, The Mind-Body Connection, Understanding Our Emotional and Physical Responses. Before I introduce our speakers, I do want to go through some quick housekeeping announcements. This training is being recorded. You will receive a copy of this recording in an email from Zoom within 24 hours. If you don't see that email, don't worry. I'm going to drop my email here into the chat. You can also reach out to me, and I'll make sure you get the links to the recordings and the materials. This training is approved for by the Florida Bar for CLE credit. We have 1 general credit and 1 mental health and wellness credit. I want to announce the CLE code towards the end of the session. I will also include that code into the chat. It will also be included in that email that you get from Zoom. Closed captions are enabled for anybody who needs them. If you're having any issues with accessibility or the captions, you can reach out to me directly. This training is being co-hosted by the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar. If you're not familiar with PILS, I highly encourage you to take a look at their website to learn a little bit more about them, and I'll drop the link in here as well. And final piece of housekeeping announcements, questions and answers. We have a Q&A feature that you can use to actually post questions. You can do it anonymously if you're shy like me. You can also drop them into the chat. We'll do our best to answer your questions as they come in, but we will probably wait until the end to answer most of them to make sure they're all covered. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce both of our speakers today. I'm going to start with Jen McDowell. Jen is a licensed attorney turned culture champion, coach, and trained mediator. After nearly 20 years in corporate America, she decided to pursue her passion for helping individuals and teams grow and overcome challenges. Jen draws on her problem-solving analysis and negotiation expertise as an attorney, her heart-forward leadership style and mediation training, and her intellectual curiosity about human emotions to help others understand the value of communication and connection at home and at work. Through her coaching, consulting, and conflict resolution work, she teaches the knowledge and skills needed for individuals and teams to build trust, meaningfully reconnect, and create a safe space to explore change. The end result, individuals and teams with renewed spirit who can effectively navigate change with confidence. Our second speaker is Amy Johnston. Amy is a licensed clinician with extensive experience working in mental health, trauma, and burnout. Amy studied at Northwestern University and the University of Chicago before moving to Dublin, Ireland, where she spent 5 years working in child protective services and inpatient mental health. Upon her return to Chicago, Amy joined the pediatric intensive care unit at Lurie's Children's Hospital, where she worked as a medical social worker and team leader to support the mental health and well-being of patients, families, and hospital staff. Amy took on her current role at Urban Wellness in 2019 and has built their well-being at work program to engage leaders in essential conversations about mental health at work, implement employee well-being assessments, and provide customized mental health support for organizations where well-being is a priority and employee mental health matters. As a clinician, Amy specializes in burnout, grief, and trauma and compassion fatigue. She is also a certified perinatal mental health specialist. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to both of our speakers. We're going to start with Jen. I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'll be here in the back.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for that introduction. Amy and I are both really happy to be here. As you heard Jorge share in my background, I'm a former lawyer. And if you're wondering how in the world I kind of made this leap from law to the work that I do today, it was really sort of a journey for me, and it continues to be a journey. My practice, when I was practicing, I was in-house. I worked in a heavily regulated environment and large corporations. And so I had a lot of stress at my job, as you might imagine. And the stress that I had really came from a lot of different places. It came from the regulators. It came from the clients that I was working with externally. It came from the internal business partners that I was working with, and it even came from within my own team, the people that I was working with every day. So couple of years ago, my corporate role got eliminated, and that gave me the opportunity to really kind of take some time to think about what type of work I wanted to do next that was really meaningful for me. And so I made this pivot into leadership development and supporting teams as they're navigating change. And I do that with a mix of workshops, conflict resolution services, and coaching, as Jorge shared. The work that I do was really heavily influenced by my time in corporate America, where I saw how really small changes in behavior can have a really significant and positive impact. And I think that's needed now more than ever when we are in such a divisive time in our country. And so I really enjoy leaning into that work, and when I work with clients every day. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of my insights and ideas with you today. To give you some more context, this is part one of a three-part series that kind of was birthed out of an initial conversation that I had with Alexis a couple of months ago, I think, at this point. And so when she and I got to talking about where there is a lot of interest, where there is a lot of need, we got on this idea of burnout, and particularly supporting the staff who are handling hotline calls and kind of dealing with the stress all day, every day. And so, as I was kind of thinking about who else might be a good candidate to participate in this, Amy was one of the first people that came to mind, given her clinical background, her work in trauma, her work in burnout, employee wellness. And so I reached out to Amy. I was glad to have Amy say yes. She also said, hey, I've got another colleague I work with on these issues a lot who probably would be interested. And so the three of us put our heads together. The third person's name is Ashley Frankel. And what ended up coming out of this is sort of a custom three-part program for all of you over the course of the next couple of weeks. So today in part one, we're going to be talking about your mind and your body, what's happening when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. Amy's going to spend some time talking about the impact of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. And then we're going to wrap up with some tools and techniques that can support you when you are feeling stressed and overwhelmed and burnt out. I'll do a deep dive into emotional identification and regulation. And then Amy will wrap us up with some self-soothing techniques that are really kind of a teaser, one, to kind of get you started, but two, also a teaser for the additional content that Ashley is going to be delivering next week. So we've got time for questions. And with that, I think, Amy, is there anything else? I can turn it over to you at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think that is a good roadmap for where we're headed over the next 45 minutes or so. I'm really happy to be with y'all today. Jorge gave a very extensive intro for me, so you just heard a lot about me. What I'll say is I came to this work within sort of the law space, kind of by accident, a little bit. I knew that I'd wanted to do some well-being work with stressed out people everywhere. But when the initial parts of COVID were happening and I was working as a therapist, I actually had a lot of law related clients coming in for therapy at the time. And over and over and over again, I was just hearing the stress, the burnout, the overwhelm that folks within the legal field were experiencing. And from there, I ended up going to the I Will conference as a presenter, the Wellbeing in Law conference. And I met Ashley, who you'll all get to meet next week. And we realized how aligned we were in both what we were trying to do sort of clinically with folks, and then that the legal profession was just a space that was so excited and ready to do some work around building up our capacity for resilience and recognizing how hard this work really is, right? So I'm just really happy to be with you all today. And I think hopefully you're all going to walk away from today with a deeper understanding of what's been going on for you and some tools that you can use to take care of yourselves. Starting out, I always like to have a check-in so that I know where everyone's at. And also we can just take a minute to see where we are at, because we move through our day so quickly that we don't often take time to even think about how we're doing. So just take a minute, take a breath or two, be in your mind and body for a moment and think about where you're starting from today, right? And then in the chat, if you don't mind, just give us a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So are we feeling energized, ready to go, fully caffeinated? Are you feeling pretty balanced, kind of steady? Are you feeling a little bit depleted, maybe a little bit run down? Or are you feeling kind of all the way burned out, tanks on empty, really like nothing left for you? Or sometimes we're in this like, I don't even know space. I call it like wired and tired, right? We're feeling kind of energized and exhausted, sometimes back to back. It's going to take a minute to give you guys some time in the chat so we can see where we're starting.
Amy, I also cannot see your slides. I don't know if you are sharing.
I am sharing. Can you not see the slides? No?
I can't.
I do see them, so I think it's working. I'll
Oh,
check in the
okay.
chat just in case.
Yeah, folks, if you cannot see the slides, you should see a self check-in slide with a big road and our 1 through 5s on there. If you can't see them, let us know.
I see it now.
Got it? Okay. All right, so we've got some 3s, some 2s, some 1s, lots of 2s. We've got a few bodies on empty, a few more 3s. Just landed from outer space. What is going on? That's how somebody's feeling today. I like that. Got a 5, another 2. Okay. So we have a pretty good mix of where folks are at today. But a lot of 3s, feeling a little bit low. Okay. My hope is that by the end of this conversation, you're able to move up a little bit in that scale, maybe feeling a little bit more balanced or even a little bit of energy. So let's see where we can get to. All right. So why are we talking about this, right? Well, we live in this age of always on, right? And so a lot of you, especially folks working on the hotline, you're basically getting endlessly encountered with stressors with very little time for recovery, right? So that you're picking up the phone, you're handling a difficult situation, you're hanging it up, and another call's coming right back in. In the midst of that, you're also dealing with whatever else is going on at home with your kids, with your partner, with your friends. You've got other work obligations outside of your hotline work, right? Things are coming at us fast and quick. Sometimes I even have folks think about like all the different ways that we can be contacted with stressful situations, right? We've got our text messages, our emails, our Zooms, our Slack chats, our G chats. I used to have a pager when I worked at the hospital. That was a lot of fun. So many ways, right? But we spend very little time in recovery. So in the chat, just to get an idea of what's going on for folks, if you're feeling up to it, pop in just some of the stressors that are coming up for you lately, just a couple of words. But what are the biggest stressors in your day-to-day that are showing up or impacting you right now? I'll tell you mine are the back to school madness, trying to get everyone's schedules organized at the same time, and still actually get to do my job. My poor husband, I usually name him as a stressor too. Anytime I'm talking with folks, he's always like, how many times did you make fun of me in your session today? What are some stressors that are popping up for folks?
I know for me, it's balancing all of the obligations, all the things, right? Work, family, dog, friends, health, exercise.
Right? So many, they're coming
It's
at us.
all the things, yeah.
We've got health issues, time management or lack thereof, finding balance, coordinating after school activities, meeting grant deadlines, work, life, law school, personal and family balance, right? Lots of similarities in what we're showing here. So people are dealing with multiple things coming at us all the time. Yeah, if you want to keep adding to that, please. Work-home balance is a myth. I feel that sometimes. So please feel free to keep adding to that chat, because I think part of what's such a benefit about joining each other in these spaces is learning from each other, and also understanding that you guys are not alone in this, right? Lots of people are dealing with specific situations, but we're all dealing with this overwhelming experience of stress. And we're going to talk a little bit about stress. So stress itself is not necessarily the problem, right? Stress can be good or bad, but we have this stress cycle that we live in. So a lot of the time it starts with a stressor. Our alarm bells go off in our brains. Our fight, flight, freeze reaction happens. And then in an ideal world, we have a little bit of a come down, we recover, and we go about our day, right? So this happens in a situation where, like, let's say you're driving down the street and a deer runs out in front of you on the road, and your alarm bells in your brain go off. Your cortisol and your adrenaline spike. Your brain narrows to handle the situation at hand. Your muscles tense. Your respiratory rate goes up. You slam on the brakes. The deer runs off. Everybody's okay. Whew. You take a deep breath. Your cortisol and your adrenaline go back to normal. You might say to someone in the car, oh my gosh, did you see that? Or you might call your partner and be like, I just nearly hit a deer, but I'm okay. Everything relaxes, you're safe, and you go about your day. And that is your stress response working exactly as it was meant to, right? All of those things are happening at once in your brain and body, your hormones, your muscles, your respiratory system to keep you safe. And so that's where our stress cycle is working perfectly well. The problem is that in our current day-to-day society, our jobs, our lives, the work that you all are doing, we are often skipping that recovery space because the fight, flight, freeze response doesn't work in these situations. So if your stressor is that you get a really difficult hotline call that you can't, fix or make right by the end of the call, your alarm bells are going off, your adrenaline, your cortisol are going up, your respiratory rate increases, your heart rate goes up, you're having this response, and then the person on the other end of the phone who's still really distressed hangs up because they decide that they don't want to have this conversation anymore, or someone comes in the room and you can't finish it. And now in that moment, you don't get that, whew, everything's okay. We've moved through that. We've handled it. We're missing that step. We're kind of activated. Our stress response is up. And next thing you know, the phone rings again, or someone comes in to ask you for something, or you have to go back to a meeting, right? So we're stuck in this cycle where our stress response is constantly elevated and we're not getting that recovery. So lots of the stressors that you guys mentioned in that list are things that unfortunately we cannot fight, we cannot run away from, and we cannot hide from. As much as we might like to hide under our desk sometimes when a difficult situation is happening, it's probably not, socially appropriate. So we're stuck. Of course, we're not feeling great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of the window of tolerance. And what I mean by the window of tolerance is the stressors that are coming at us are not always the problem. Our ability to cope with the stressors is sometimes the bigger challenge. So our window of tolerance means when we're doing well, when we're getting enough sleep, fully resourcing ourselves, talking with our friends, having, some exercise every day, all the things that make us feel good that we're going to get to a little bit more in session 2, our window is nice and big and we can tolerate difficult situations. So our alarm clock goes off late and we're running late for work, but we take a deep breath, dry shampoo our hair, grab a cup of coffee and get out the door. We get to work and we find out that somebody scheduled a meeting that we weren't expecting. We're irritated, but we take a deep breath, grab our notes, chat with a friend really quick about it and move on along our day. Our ups and downs are happening and we can handle them. When we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're burnt out, when we're not taking good care of ourselves, when we're not getting enough sleep, when things feel unmanageable, those same stressors start to be intolerable. So our alarm goes off and we are so disappointed in ourselves that we're late again, and we go to pour coffee, but we're so distracted we spill it all over our bag, and then we yell at our dog, and then we're speeding to get to work and we get pulled over, right? It's a knock-on effect of things because we can't cope with those stressors in the same way. So when we're above our window of tolerance, we're angry and activated or anxious. When we're below our window of tolerance, we're flat, we're unmotivated. And so the idea is that the same situation can be happening and we can tolerate it or not, right? How many of you have had a situation where, let's say I have 2 little kids. If I'm stressed out in the morning and they can't get their shoes on and get out the door on time and I am in a bad space, I'm yelling at them, get your shoes on, come on, we gotta go. Why are we late again? We're always late. And then they're upset and the whole morning is a wreck. If I'm in a better space and they're having trouble getting out the door on time, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to say, hey, let me get your shoes on you. Let me help you tie those. Come on, guys, we need to get out the door. Grab a banana for the car. The situation is the same, but my response to the situation is very different. So what we really need to think about is how are we able to expand our window of tolerance, and how are we able to notice in ourselves when we're not ourselves, right? When we're reacting to things in a way that we wouldn't normally. I know I'm moving through this fast, but we've got a lot to get through. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or keep them for the end. I want you to just think about this. We're not going to take a lot of time sharing on it right now, but just something to notice and acknowledge that you guys are dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of stressors coming through on the hotline all the time, right? So just thinking about what are some of the ways that those traumas might cycle between you and your clients and your systems, and how do they impact you, right? What are the types of traumas? So if there's something you want to share in the chat, you can. Otherwise, this is just really a reflection for you to start thinking about as we move through the rest of the conversation. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the impacts of chronic stress, because we can't think about how to handle them, how to deal with them, how to address them if we're not able to acknowledge them for what's really happening, right? Being able to understand what's happening in our brains and bodies is so important to be able to make a fix. So when we're dealing with chronic stress, trauma exposure, compassion fatigue, these are all different things, but they all have very similar impacts on how we show up. So our levels of cortisol, that's our stress hormone, and our adrenaline are really high at a consistent rate when we're chronically stressed. We're not getting that drop back down to baseline, that whew moment. And when we have that chronically high stress hormone in our bodies and our brains, it's really depleting us. It's going to impact us physically, emotionally, within our relationships, and within how we do our work, right? So ultimately, when we're looking at this chronic stress, when the demands on us are outweighing our resources or our ability to cope, well, you see what happens to that poor person that was sitting in that chair at that desk, right? We go up in smoke sometimes. Not good. So what does this mean a little bit more in detail? How are these items showing up for us? Okay. Number one, cognitively, physically, right? Brain and body. We might be feeling helpless, hopeless, like there's nothing we can do, there's no point, that the needs of the world around us or the needs of our organization are so big that, like, what's the point of even trying? We might feel like we can never do enough, right? No matter how hard we work, it feels like a drop in the bucket compared to everything that's happening around us all the time. We could get physical impacts on this, right? So exhaustion, migraines, GI issues, back pain, right? How many of us have ever gone to the doctor and expected that they would say, here's a medical reason for why you feel this way, and here's a medication or a procedure that we're going to do to fix you right up again and get you on your way, right? Oftentimes we go and we say, I have XYZ symptoms, and our doctor says, you should probably reduce your stress, right? How unsatisfying is that? When you're like, but my life is all of these things. How do I reduce my stress? But they're not wrong, right? Reducing your stress is probably the most important thing you can do, but it's not easy. We might have addictions showing up. And now addictions in and of themselves don't mean that you are having chronic stress or a trauma exposure, but it can be a sign or a symptom or something to look at, right? If you notice that your alcohol intake or your substance intake is going up in times when you're chronically stressed or you're exposed to more trauma, or if you notice that you're kind of using substances in a way to numb out or take care of yourself, or you're doing more of anything that you really don't want to be doing, spending too much time scrolling on your phone or disengaging from friends and family. We just need to pay attention to that. From an emotional point of view, a lot of times when we're in this chronic stress trauma space, we might be hypervigilant, right? Our anxiety is on high alert. Even when I go on vacation, sometimes if I know I've been highly stressed, it's like, hurry up and have fun, right? Here's my list of all the fun things we have to do on vacation. And my husband and my kids will be like, Mom, calm down. Like, let's just chill. And it's like, no, we have to have all the fun. Also for folks that are in marginalized communities, for people of color, for LGBTQ folks, hypervigilance is a really understandable reaction to the types of stressors and traumas that we're dealing with, right? Sometimes things aren't safe and we need to pay attention to that. So there's hypervigilance around actual safety. And then there can be hypervigilance in the workplace too around anticipatory anxiety, right? What are all the things that could possibly go wrong, and how will I preemptively find them and handle them? And attorneys and law-related folks really seem to connect with this one a lot, right? Because your job is to find problems and fix problems. We might have a lot of, sorry, I just want to make sure there's nothing in the chat. Good. Jen, just stop me if there's anything that comes up in the chat that folks want to share out. Also emotionally, we might be feeling a lot of guilt or shame or sadness, right? Now, if you're somebody who's regularly pretty upbeat and feeling pretty good, and you're noticing that you're feeling really heavy, really low, you maybe even feeling guilty about taking a break or feeling guilty about noticing that these things are impacting us, it's a red flag. It's something to pay attention to. We might be really getting into space of anger, cynicism, feeling really overwhelmed with our emotions, maybe exploding or blowing up at things that we normally wouldn't, or feeling that cynical space of like, what's the point of doing this? This is all stupid. None of this matters. And we may get into that space of numbing. So when I was talking about addictions, one of the things could be like scrolling or endless Netflix episodes, or, we can numb out with substances, we can numb out with other things. But that sense of just checking out, right? Like, you 1 minute it's 6 o'clock and you just got home, and the next minute it's 10 o'clock and you're getting into bed, and you really didn't pay attention to anyone or anything during that time. That really flat mood, that feeling lack of emotion is an issue, right? A lot of times some people think of depression or low mood or sadness or tearfulness, but lack of emotion is really important. And when Jen talks with you a little bit more about emotional identification, that's going to be really essential that you can do that. When we think about relationships, we might find ourselves being much more isolated, right? Hoping that people might cancel on us for plans, not wanting to go out, not wanting to make plans, avoiding people, not answering your text messages, leaving your voicemail full. All of those things are signs and symptoms that maybe we're not feeling our best, right? A sense of persecution or martyrdom, like I don't have any control over what's happening in my role, or my boss is the worst and they're making this happen, or if only these people calling the hotline would make different choices. Those are all that sense of like, woe is me, or martyrdom, or I'm taking all this on. And that kind of feeds into the sense of reduced empathy or minimizing. So if you've had a really hard day, you've heard some really horrible stories, a lot of trauma, and you get home and your partner's like, wow, I sure did have a bad day at the coffee shop today. And you're like, sorry, what did you say? Like, you think you had a bad day? We get into this space of comparative suffering, and that's really not helpful, right? So if we are saturated with stress and distress, it's really hard to hold anyone else's stuff. So at that point, what we do is we minimize their stuff instead. Because if I was to acknowledge that maybe my partner or my kids are also having a hard time, but I don't have the capacity to support them, that doesn't feel good either. That makes me feel like I'm not doing a good job. So by minimizing and sort of not having empathy for others, we can feel like my stuff is heavy and important, and I don't need to handle the people around me. And that feeds right into my favorite, irritability and conflict with your spouse and family. So, I'm a social worker, I'm a therapist. I spend most of my day being really empathetic and hopefully warm and caring towards all the people I'm working with. And sometimes by the end of the day or by the end of the rough week, I don't have anything left for the people at home, and I'm maybe not so nice to them, right? My husband has said to me, like, how are you a therapist? You're not even nice. And I'm like, I am so nice all day long. But we run out of steam, right? So if you're noticing that you're more irritable, more on edge, more likely to engage in conflict with people that you really care about, that is a flag waving at you saying, hey, we need to look at your chronic stress, your trauma exposure, what's going on for you. And then finally, we're looking at occupational, right? What's going on in the workplace, within our jobs, within our volunteer roles. Inability to kind of hold complexity, to sort of see both sides of a situation, right? Feeling very black and white. This is right, this is wrong. When that's the place our brains are in, we know that we're in that stress space. Diminished creativity. Now that might mean you're not doing art or music or dance or things that you may have loved doing, but it could also just mean like inability to think outside the box, right? Inability to think innovatively, inability to come up with fresh ideas. Avoidance, missed appointments, showing up late, no showing for things, not feeling motivated to get the work done, especially if it's something you really love, right? If you start noticing that parts of your work don't feel good anymore and you're not excited or motivated to do them. And then another one of my favorites, grandiosity. And that is the sense that like, if I don't do this, everything will fall apart. I am the keeper of all the secrets. I know how everything functions. I have to be here to make it work. If I take time off, it's going to fall to pieces. Well, that's just not true, right? Because if you unfortunately fell ill and ended up in the hospital tomorrow, like somebody would step in. They may not do it exactly the same way you would, but we get to a point when we're under this chronic stress and pressure that we have to do all the things all the time. And then that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't support others to build the skills and the abilities to do what we do. That was a lot of information at once, but when you take these slides home, you're going to have an opportunity to kind of think through them. But I'd love to hear from you guys just in the chat briefly. Which of those might show up for you in your daily life? Which resonated? Which felt like maybe things that you didn't think of as a stress response before, but now are like, huh, yeah, I do see that in myself. I'm going to flip back to that for just a second in case you want to have one quick look at them. But feel free to pop in the chat which ones maybe resonate for you, which ones might show up in your day-to-day. Got some relationals, definitely the reduced empathy.
Yeah, I think I would say for me, the majority of them I have felt in the last week even, so.
Got that sense of pressure when stress triggers.
Yeah, or like losing my shit at my dog who's stopping to smell every third blade of grass, right? It's
Oh
like,
my gosh. I have a
yeah.
16-year-old Yorkie and walking him is the most stressful.
Yeah.
Right, but things
Yeah,
that when you're doing okay aren't a big deal.
right.
But when your window of tolerance is this big, you can no longer cope.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on for sake of time, but please add to the chat with what's been going on in your mind while you've been listening to these and which ones of these maybe like rang a bell for you or lit up a little bit of a flashing light bulb that said, oh, I got to think about that a little bit. I do notice that happening for myself. All right. I'm going to pass it back to Jen.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about emotional identification and regulation. And before I do that, I wanted to kind of take a pulse check on everybody's level of comfort experiencing and working through your feelings. Let's do a 1 to 5 scale, similar to what Amy did before, with 1 being, I am not comfortable at all. I am a classic feeling stuffer. To 5, I'm a pro. My therapist says like I get a gold star every week. So we've got 1s, 4s, we've got kind of a range. We can be sort of in the middle sometimes. I think when I'm in my window of tolerance, Amy, I do a better job at it. And when I'm not in my window of tolerance, I'm a stuffer, for example. So we've got all kinds of people in all of the ranges. So before I kind of go through some of the tools and the techniques that might be helpful to you, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these myths or limiting beliefs that sort of are pervasive in society, work, our family constructs. And those are really around this idea that feelings are bad or that there are no room for feelings at work. Amy, you kind of teed up this perfect example of with the window of tolerance of, you're in a bad mood, the kids can't get their shoes tied, everything is kind of a mess. And yet, there's this sort of unwritten expectation that as soon as you show up at work and open up your computer, that you become a robot, there are no feelings, you're not human anymore, and you just are expected to perform all day. And I would like to challenge that today a little bit. And so I thought it might be helpful to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about where do those ideas come from and what is the contrasting reality of actually allowing our feelings. So as you probably are not surprised to learn, a lot of our perspective around feelings has to do with our upbringing. There are all of these cultural norms that tell us to avoid, talking about our feelings, these deep interpersonal communications where, we're sharing our feelings, we're allowing our feelings, or we're even talking about our feelings in relationship with another person. Of course, social media does not help with any of that, because a lot of what you see on social media is this idea of like all of the rosy, happy is good, everything else either doesn't exist or it's bad or it should be hidden. I think there is a little bit of pushback that we're starting to see in terms of posting around authenticity and things like that. But social media has not helped this construct of there is only one way to be, and that's happy and joyful and perfect, and everything is rosy. And so that upbringing kind of tends to lead to these false stories that we tell ourselves around feelings are good, or I shouldn't have certain feelings, or I can't explain this feeling, so I shouldn't feel it. It's not rational. But if you will kind of go on an adventure with me, think about pain, right? So physical pain tells us information. If you close your eyes and you think about, a time when you felt pain, where was it in your body? What was the pain like? Was it achy? Was it dull? Was it sharp? Was it system-wide? That pain tells you something. And so I would like to sort of propose the idea that, like physical pain, emotions offer a lot of valuable information about what's going on in our mind and our body. And so, the corollary, or the reality to this idea that, feelings are bad, is that all feelings have a purpose, and they're important for our overall health. I mean, Amy's done a beautiful job talking earlier about we all have mental health all the time. There are all of these direct correlations between our mental health and our physical health. And quite frankly, the longer you ignore your mental health, the longer your issues will persist. And if those issues are causing suffering, the more you're prolonging your suffering. So, I think that's one really strong justification for allowing your feelings fully. Another story that we often tell ourselves is if we allow our feelings or talk about our feelings with others, that it'll harm our personal identity, or it will shape the way that people perceive us. And we tell ourselves things like, I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't want to embarrass someone else, or I don't want to be perceived as needy or pushy or insecure. There's certainly this gender component of good girls don't act out or make waves or speak up, and the reality is actually sort of the opposite, because when you do allow your emotions, it helps you know yourself and what you need. And it gives you that power of awareness, which is really sort of beautifully illustrated by the quote on the right-hand side of the slide. So between sort of the stimulus and response is this pause or space, ever so brief as it may be. And when you have the opportunity to, pause in that space, it gives you choice. You can either continue to react instinctively, or you can respond with intention. And when you respond, that's sort of the basis for growth, change, freedom, and all of the benefits that you get through emotional awareness and identification and regulation. The other thing that's kind of interesting about identity when it comes to allowing and sharing your feelings is that when you share your feelings, it allows you to shape the narrative that people have about you. If you think about the concept of an iceberg, what you see sort of above the surface is just a very small part of it. And if you are not sharing your emotions, the person that is, that you're interacting with only sees what's above the water. And that allows sort of this vacuum for them to make their own assumptions about what's going on, or to create their own narrative about you, which can often be incomplete or wrong or unfair or an oversimplification. So when you are sort of creating that space for your emotions, it allows for a more holistic picture. There's also data that shows that the better people regulate their emotions, the happier they are, the more financially successful they are. And I don't know about you, but those are things that I think would be amazing. So the last piece I'll just touch on briefly is this idea of, I don't want to harm the relationship. Again, I don't want to upset the group balance. I don't want to, isolate myself from the group. I don't want to damage the relationship or cause someone to be upset with me. But the reality is that when you sort of stuff those emotions, you don't allow them, it still contaminates the relationship, because your emotions will come out in other ways, either because you're disengaging from a conversation, or you will just blow up at someone for some unknown reason, because it's just sort of the last straw and you can't help yourself. So with that, we'll go into the next slide, Amy, if you don't mind, and we'll talk about a couple of techniques that I have to help you with emotional identification and regulation. Both of them, again, are sort of based on this idea of awareness, because once you have that awareness, that then you have choice. And this first one is called the feelings wheel. And I find that it's a really helpful tool. It's tangible. It's something you can hold. It's something that you can look at. And it's really valuable when you're feeling kind of jumbled and overwhelmed, or even when you've reached that sort of flat, numb stage that Amy talked about, because it's something like right in front of you that you can say, I feel this way. So there are different iterations of feelings wheels, but they all kind of are structured the same way, in that you sort of have these concentric circles. And inside you have sort of core emotions. And then as you get further out, there are different sort of iterations of those feelings that tie back to a core emotion. Again, the value here is in identification. And as Susan David, for those of you who follow along, she talks about the fact that emotions are signposts that indicate what's important to us. And so in that way, our feelings can, help us draw correlations to what it is that we need and what it is that's important to us, and that maybe we have or need to get in order to feel more balanced with our emotions. So, on the bottom half of the feelings wheel, you have things like calm, happy, strong. These are generally indications that your needs are met. These are generally viewed as pleasant emotions, but they also require a degree of vulnerability to experience them. To allow them fully, you have to sort of embrace them, even though they are transient and may not last. On the flip side, you have sad, fear, anger, and these are indicators that you have needs that are unmet, or there may be some sort of mismatch with your values. So for example, if you're feeling sad, when you are feeling sad, it can put you into a state where you are feeling quite contemplative. And that may help give you insight into the fact that you value community or trust. By contrast, if you're feeling angry, for example, anger can be really constructive when it's channeled in a really productive activity or way. And it can be an indicator that you value things like fairness or respect. So one of the things that I find can be really helpful is when you are using your feelings and coupling them with bodily sensations. And so I will add the caveat that for people who have past trauma or are currently working through trauma, sometimes this idea of tapping into what our bodies are feeling can be difficult because we don't feel safe in our bodies, or because our brain is telling us messages that maybe are disproportionate to the amount of the threat. So I would encourage you to kind of undertake this exercise of what am I feeling in my body, if you feel safe doing so. Let me drop into the chat an attachment here. Jorge, would you mind to drop that? Oh, there it is.
Yes, I'll drop it in a minute.
Okay, I think I've got it here. So I have a handout for you. There we go. That I would like you to just take a minute to take a look at. And so as we are kind of working through these slides, the first step is to really help you reflect on what is the correlation between what I'm feeling in my body and the emotion that I'm experiencing. So you can think about if you're feeling fearful, your heart rate may rise. If you're feeling angry, you may feel sort of tension in your shoulders and your back or your neck or your stomach, or if you're feeling sad, you may feel sort of slumped in and kind of, curled in on yourself, pulling into the fetal position. And so this first step of the handout can really help you draw some connections between what types of things do you feel in your body and how might those be indicators that you're experiencing a certain emotion within the feelings wheel. The last thing that you can ask yourself is really, what are those emotions telling you about needs that need to be met or are unmet, or things that you value that may be missing in your life. So I don't know if anyone at this point feels comfortable sharing some observations about when they feel a particular emotion, how that shows up for them in their body.
Well, Jen, I always notice that when I even say the word anxiety, my shoulders go up, right? Like I know that I hold anxiety or nervousness or tension in my neck and my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have found myself like needing to just roll my shoulders down my back, like loosen that part of my body up, and it instantly makes me feel better, right? There's such a huge connection for me between finding the place I'm holding tightness and loosening it up. And then I also know
Yeah.
that I hold like fear in my stomach, in my guts, in my belly. Like I know that I feel like uncomfortable in my belly when I'm afraid. Where I was
Yeah.
at Great America and had to go on 5 roller coasters Friday, and let me tell you, I felt the fear. But I've noticed more and more that when I breathe into or expand that part of my body, my emotion lessens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in alignment with what I'm seeing a little bit in the chat around, like we notice shifts in our breathing, you know, it may get really shallow. You know, I think about, you know, sort of this fear, hypervigilance, kind of shutting down. And, you know, one of the techniques that I know is useful for some people is like taking a pause and looking around and thinking, I'm in my home, I'm safe, I don't have anything to be afraid of. Right. So I'm sure these are all techniques that Ashley is going to be getting into the next program. But yeah, there's this real correlation, pacing. Yeah. So with that, let's move on to the next slide and kind of keep things moving. So the next one that I'll just try and touch on briefly, because there's a lot of overlap between the feelings wheel and Amy, some of the things that you talked about trauma response. Is something called the change triangle. And again, it's based on this concept of awareness, because once you become aware of something, you can take action to change it. This particular model was developed by a psychotherapist by the name of Hillary Jacobs Hendel. And I think that this particular one is really helpful because it helps articulate the relationship between the behaviors that we exhibit and some of the emotions that we experience. And so this particular model is based on the theory that if we allow what are called core emotions, it leads us to a state of open-heartedness, where we experience sort of our authentic self. We can have an open and loving heart and a calm and curious mind. And so at the bottom of the triangle, you have what are core emotions, which are essentially very similar to what you see sort of in the center of a feelings wheel. These core emotions tell us things about our environment. Am I safe? Are my needs met or unmet? And they aren't subject to conscious control. We just feel them. We can't control whether we feel them. And the core emotions also tell us things that are important for our survival, going back to like run from the tiger in the cave, you know, millennia ago. In the upper right-hand corner, you have inhibitory emotions, which can block core emotions when either our core emotions are in conflict with what pleases others, or when our core emotions become too intense and our brain feels like we need to protect ourselves from that emotional overwhelm. In the upper left, you see the defenses, which is a lot of what Amy talked about as indicators of trauma responses, which is anything we do to avoid either the core or the inhibitory feelings. And it can be things like sarcasm, doom scrolling. I know, Amy, you talked about that. And all of sort of the excessive behaviors that we can engage in, over or under eating, working too much, exercising too much, and certainly substance use. You know, the benefit again of the change triangle is that it's bringing you this awareness. It helps you gain perspective from sort of the immediate feeling that you are having, and it gives you clarity around what direction that you can take in order to help you feel better. And so questions that you can ask yourself are, where am I on the triangle? Am I engaging in some sort of defensive behavior that's isolating me from some of these other emotions that I am feeling? Where do I want to go? Do I want to go sort of clockwise and down? Or do I want to, at this moment, go counterclockwise and just go back into a defensive behavior because that's what I feel like I need right now? And that also helps you explore what core emotions are at play. So Amy, if you want to go to the last slide, I'll try and go through some of this pretty quickly, but this is some final reminders that I wanted to share with you around emotional identification and regulation. And the first is really to start from the idea of that, we should allow our feelings without judgment, because all feelings have a purpose. There are no good or bad feelings. There are upsides and downsides to every feeling, and we can't choose them. So there's sort of no sense in fighting them at this point. The other thing that I'll share is that we each have a unique relationship with our feelings. So for example, if you think back to the feelings wheel, someone or some of you may have an easier time feeling and expressing things like joy and calm, while others may have an easier time feeling and expressing anger or sadness or fear. But again, all of our emotions are valid. It helps us understand what's important to us. And because our feelings are not logical, if we dismiss them, it deprives us of the opportunity to learn from them and care for ourselves. The next thing that I wanted to share with you as a final tip is that emotions are really complex. We can have multiple emotions at once. You can be both excited and scared, like Amy, the roller coaster example that you talked about. We can be both happy and sad. I mean, people talk about tears of joy. Brene Brown, for those of you who might follow her, talks about this idea of foreboding joy, which is this sense of joy, but also coupled with this sense of fear that something may jeopardize what we are experiencing. Emotions can also mask one another, and this is particularly true around anger. Anger is a really good mask for things like sadness or fear. And so when you're feeling something like that, or strong emotion, it can be really important to sort of dig a little bit deeper and to see if there's anything else sort of secondary that's underneath that might also be really insightful for helping you move through that emotion. The last thing I'll say here is that the strength or weakness of an emotion is not tied to its importance. So again, Amy, going back to this idea of the roller coaster, you might have been feeling excited and scared, maybe feeling more scared than excited at times, but that still doesn't mean that the excitement isn't valid, right? That excitement is still valid, even though it might be felt in a lesser degree. So the last piece is really around the idea that feelings can be contagious, kind of like germs, which is a gross analogy, but I bring this up to say that this is really true for both positive and or pleasant and unpleasant emotions. How many times have you been in a room or in a meeting where someone said something and you kind of just felt the energy shift because they injected some enthusiasm into the room and then that kind of caught on? The same for, someone saying something that's rude or mean, and that kind of puts you in a foul mood for the rest of the day. The reason why I bring this up is that, I want you to recognize that you get to have your feelings, the other person gets to have your feelings, and recognizing that feelings can be contagious gives you that opportunity, that awareness to decide whether you want to pick up and carry the emotions of the other person. So with that, Amy, I'll turn it over to you. We've got a couple minutes left to do some self-soothing techniques, and then we can wrap up. Yeah.
Perfect. We're nearly there. I love that that point about feelings being contagious. My dad had the most contagious laugh. So anytime he would tell a joke, whether you heard the joke or not, he would laugh so hard at his own stuff that he would laugh till he cried, and everybody around him would start laughing till they cried, and nobody even knew what they were laughing about. But it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
So spoiler alert, these are some of the things that we are going to look at in our next session. We do not have the time to cover all these today, but when Ash and I come back to you next week, we're going to give you a little bit of a deeper dive on some of these practices for centering ourselves. But what I will say today is that we're going to look at things like, how do we find some balance, right? What does that look like? How can we be curious about why we're doing the work we're doing and whether we can keep doing it? We're going to think about compassion and community and how those things are essential in supporting us and to be building that window of tolerance, right? And then we're also going to think about choosing our focus, right? There are so many things happening all at once, and some things we can control and many things that we can't. And how do we focus in on the parts that we do have a little bit more control over? But just to kind of move us out of today's conversation, we're just going to do a quick practice for centering ourselves as we move back into our workday. So if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. You can also just kind of lower them and lower your gaze. Maybe make sure you're comfortable in your seat. Some folks say make sure your feet are flat on the floor, but that's never the most comfortable for me. So just get comfy and take a deep breath in and a deep exhale. And one more breath in and one more exhale. And I want you in your mind's eye to just picture someone that you really care about. We're going to do a little bit of a meditation on compassion to finish up today. Someone you really love, someone you really care about, living or not, could be a person or pet. And while you're picturing that person in front of you really clearly, I want you to imagine a light going from your heart to theirs. And I want you to give them the intention, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you feel peaceful, and may you be loved. May you be happy, may you be safe, may you feel peaceful, and may you feel loved. And now I want you to imagine a whole group of people you really care about. Could be all your colleagues, your neighbors, your family. And as you're picturing all of them in front of you, I want you to imagine that same light shining from your heart to all of theirs and give them that same intention. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you feel peaceful. And may you feel loved. And now I want you to picture yourself standing right in front of you like a mirror. And I want all of those beams of light to shoot from everyone around back into that version of yourself. And I want you to give yourself that same intention. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you feel peaceful. May you feel loved. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I feel peaceful. And may I feel loved. And take a deep breath in. And another deep breath out. And you can open your eyes. And hopefully you feel just that little bit more calm, that little bit more resourced. And that is just a kind of tiny little practice on compassion to give you a taste of what we might dive further into next week, where we'll actually look more at how do we use our breath, our energy, some gratitude practice, and how do we calm our nervous systems in the moment, and how do we build up our reserves for the future. We have a couple of minutes here, and I can stick around for a few if you have any questions. If not, we will see you next week.
Yeah, I just
That was
put
a great
that.
exercise and a great teaser for part 2, by the way. I'll drop a lot of this information here in the chat. All of you are going to get everything via email. The materials that were shared by Jen, those are also going to go out. And I will send everything in an email. I think I see somebody posted a question. Somebody saying, thank you so much. The presentation was awesome. So thank you both, Amy and Jen. So we still have a few minutes. So if anybody wants to ask a question or drop any other comments in the chat, I just see a lot of comments coming into the chat, thanking our speakers today.
Yeah, we had somebody asking to put this feelings wheel slide back up, so I just popped that back up for you.
Yeah, and I think Amy will send slides, or we'll get those to Jorge.
We will, yeah, we'll get
Okay.
the slides to Jorge, so you'll get a PDF of these slides. You don't have to write them down or anything like that.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to share what was something that's a big takeaway for them today, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, if anyone's still here with us, any takeaways that you had, anything that you are gonna bring back to your day or your practice. See if anything pops up. Also, you see a couple of emails on the screen there, and we're happy to follow up after the session too if you have any questions.
Yes, all of your feelings are valid. That was sort of a mind blower for me, and I think I was in my 40s when I learned that. So
Yes, to everybody seeking therapy. We should all, every therapist should have a therapist, and everyone else join us in the therapy space.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions that I ask when I'm looking for like either a coach, mentor coach, or a therapist is, do you have a therapist? Do you have a coach? Are you doing the work, right, to grow yourself and to heal yourself? Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you to everyone who spent the time with us today. We know that you're all super busy, and it takes a lot to block an hour out of your day for something. So we appreciate you being here. It's been a joy. We'll see you next week for some strategies. And then 2 weeks after that, all three of us will be with you for a panel discussion where we're going to deep dive a little further into how do we fill ourselves up, resource ourselves, build resilience for the hard work that you all do. So we'll see you again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
Right.